Ah, New York, the greatest city in the world. The streets of Manhattan exude the fandom of the 9 professional sports teams that call this city home, except for the Nets, of course. Legends of the game such as Babe Ruth, Patrick Ewing, and Eli Manning have captivated this city, and I'd argue that there's no greater passion from any city than the working class Joes and Wall Street billionaires that cheer on for their beloved teams here in New York. Unfortunately, New York, just like everyone else, has battled the highs and lows that come at being a sports fan, but some teams in particular have had rougher runs than others. The New York Knicks and the New York Jets have had a specifically grueling couple of years, to put it lightly, as both teams have not had a championship in nearly 5 decades now. To better understand the trials and tribulations of being a Knicks fan and Jets fan, I sat down with my buddies Clement Barstool and recovering Jets fan Nick Wasserman to hash up some trying memories that they had through living in these dark periods. All right, Mick. So you've been. I guess what? When did you start becoming a Jets fan?
Man, I was 7 years old. It was the year the after the Jets won the Super Bowl.
What? All right. So what was that? 69. The Jets won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so probably 1970 for my birthday. It was like a box, right? Like a big tall box. And it came with like a helmet, a jersey, pants, pads. And all the kids in like the neighborhood, they all had like this, you got the same thing. But all of them were Giants fans, and I was like the only Jets fan. So guess what game everybody loved to play? Kill the Carrier. And guess who was the Carrier? Me.
Being a fan of any sports franchise can be a roller coaster of an experience, no matter who you're rooting for. But one of the toughest and least talked about struggles is being a fan of a perennially losing team, like the New York Jets, for example. The Jets haven't brought home a Super Bowl since 1968, have never won a conference championship, and haven't seen the playoffs in over a decade.
It was never like a dominating force that I ever remember. There were like a couple of seasons where, wow, this is going to be a great season. Wow, they're doing really well. Wow, oh, they fucked it all up. Season's over. It's like, I hated that shit. Like one distinct memory I have was like during the Vinny Testaverde time, right? I'm sorry, fucking Vinny. Anyway, so I remember I came back from playing a flag football game. So it was probably late 90s, right? And I was all psyched to get home. I played the early game. So I get home, I turn the TV on. Honest to God, true story. So I'm like, all right, cool. I got just a few minutes. So I turn the TV on, and it's like Vinny's on the sideline warming up. It's right before the game had not started. So it's like 10 minutes before game time. And he's like on the side warming up. So I'm like, cool. I'm going to go take a squirt. I'm going to get my sandwich. I'm going to go watch the game. I get out of the bathroom, and I come back, and they're like carting him off the field. It's like he got hurt, and the game didn't even start. I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like he's going off on a stretcher. Like, I can't believe this. That's like so the Jets, That's just that.
All right, so the Jets have obviously caused a lot of pain for you over the years, and when I first met you in your relationship, you were still like holding on to being a Jets fan.
Absolutely.
But then I remember like distinctly having a conversation with you, and you're just like, "I'm done. They're cursed."
So it was definitely all the letdown, and it was always the prospect that this might be a good season. Like when Parcells came aboard, I happened to like him anyway. So when he came aboard, I'm like, okay, this is the start of something really good. They got really close that one year. They were like the division championship away from going to the game. And I'm like, I can't believe this. If they win, they're going to the Super Bowl. Obviously, they lost that game. But the letdown, it was so close. I could touch it. I could smell it. I thought it was really going to happen. And I'm sitting here, and I'm like, you know what? If they go, I got fucking tons of loot. I'm fucking going to the Super Bowl. Like, I'm going. I don't care what the cost is. And of course, it didn't work out. And then I was like, all right, great season. Maybe next year. That was Parcells' first season with the Jets. Then, of course, that didn't happen. So, the letdown was always there. And it was always like something good was going to happen, but never happened.
So growing up, I kind of just became a sports fan on my own. I was the oldest in my family. My dad was more of a music guy. I had a couple uncles who were kind of into sports, but I kind of just gravitated on my own. And I kind of just became a Mets. I started as a big Mets fan. I just baseball, and then the Giants I kind of just got into. But
Where
I don't
did
know,
you grow
something
up?
about those early '90s Knicks. So I grew up in Mayapack. It's a town. It's the next town basically north of Westchester County, New York. So it's about an hour and a half from the city if you're driving, a little more if you're taking the train or whatever. So I'm kind of in an interesting spot because like Long Island is big Jets, Mets, right? And then, Jersey, some other parts in the Bronx, you have a lot of Giants, Yankees. I was kind of, it's like a free for all here. It's like a more of a melting pot because it's not really, as heated. There's not teams in the tradition of stuff getting passed along. But Mets and Giants were kind of my first teams that I fell in love with in terms of sports. But those early 90s Knicks teams just like captivated me. I just loved Ewing. Charles Oakley is to this day my favorite basketball player ever. I love that guy. And like going to war with Jordan and the Bulls, it was like every single year. And it's crazy. Like I just can't fathom how kids, like I grew up with that. Every single year the Knicks would be good. They'd be in the playoffs. They'd usually, get their hearts ripped out by either Jordan, Reggie Miller, maybe in the finals. If they made it, they lose to a Texas team. But every single year, it was like a God-given right. And I still remember to this day, like an absolute idiot in 99 when they made the finals. And after they beat the Pacers to win the Eastern Conference, I remember thinking, I said to my buddy, I go, dude, are we just going to be good every year? Because that's all I knew. All I knew was how, like, I think the first, like, series I started watching was the 92 playoffs when they played the Bulls and all that, 92, 93. And every single year, it was like, basically, Eastern Conference semis was like the worst case scenario, but it was Eastern Finals, Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals, all that kind of stuff is where we would always land. And I said that to my buddy, and then little did I know, basically, it was nothing but downhill from there. The Ewing trade where they got all the bad contracts, and then Dolan taking over is kind of the beginning of the end for everything.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of people, especially the like early 2000s Knicks, that are associated with a lot of their downfall. Do you have someone in particular you just absolutely like to test?
I mean, let's see. We could go a bunch of ways here. I mean, Dolan is the root of all evil. So I mean, we've had fire Dolan shirts on, which is kind of tongue in cheek because you can't fire the owner. But I mean, everything the guy has ever done, he's rude to fans. He's rude to ex players. I mean, you have guys like Charles Oakley, again, my favorite player of all time. The guy is the heart and soul of, and that was the thing about those Knicks teams is they had the heart and soul. New York is like known for glitz and glamour, but it's a lot of hardworking people. And I think a lot of people identify with those Knicks teams because they were such hardworking guys. So a guy like Oakley getting thrown out of the Garden, Spike Lee, who became like known as the Mr. Knicks fan, gets thrown out of the Garden. Dolan going at other Knicks fans, calling them, saying like, oh, you're an alcoholic, or, I revoke your season tickets or your right to come in the game and all that stuff. He's just the absolute pit. So he's kind of the root of all this. So I'll say he's number one, but Isaiah Thomas is, probably number two. Steve Mills, who, him and Isaiah came in together. So it's like, I kind of lumped them all in together. But I mean, Isaiah, without Mills bringing in Isaiah, then you don't have the Eddie Curry trade. You don't have the Jerome James signing. You don't have a lot of the like just straight up like awfulness that killed us. Scott Layden was no picnic himself. He's the one who obviously traded Ewing and got all those awful contracts. But I mean, I feel like if it's not Dolan, you go Isaiah, and then even Steve Mills. If you look back at the Knicks, Steve Mills was there. They were terrible. It was obviously during the Isaiah tenure. Steve Mills leaves to do some work with Magic Johnson's like entertainment group. That's when Donnie Walsh comes in. The Knicks become good for a few years. Then Donnie Walsh leaves, which probably is because of Dolan, because everyone hates him. Steve Mills comes back, and it's an absolute disaster there for a few years. And now Steve Mills leaves. We have Leon Rose in charge. And look at this. We're good again. What a goddamn coincidence, huh?
What about like the Knicks being good and New York basketball just makes it like, or I don't know, like New York and the Knicks being good makes it just like a perfect match. It just seems like people are happier in the city. Like, you know what I mean?
It's true. And this is one of the things that, again, a lot of the younger fans who, like I said, God bless anyone younger than me that, in their 20s and teens and whatever, that stuck with this team, because I wouldn't be a fan of basketball anymore, probably, if that was the case. Because when it's always like a civil war in New York. It's Mets or Yankees, it's Giants or Jets, Rangers, Islanders, Devils get into the mix, right? But even with the Nets being like basically a super team in their own right, it's a Knicks city, and it's always going to be that. And it's like you finally get to come together, and it's just like one team, and you never get to see this in New York. And it is. I remember back in the '90s, man, it was something special. The Knicks would lead off, the radio shows back when Mike and the Mad Dog were on. If everyone was humming and every team had a storyline going on, Knicks led the way every single time. Knicks on the back page. It was Knicks, Knicks, Knicks. And the city, New York City is unique in the sense that it is a baseball town. And there's not a lot of those. Like Boston's one, Chicago's one, but it's also a basketball town. And to have like a lot of cities, football is number 1 or 2. But even with the Giants did have the Super Bowl runs and all that, but like when everything's equal, basketball and baseball run New York City, and the Knicks kind of bring everything together where you get that kind of unification of the city, and it is awesome. And again, I don't know what the Nets are going to have to do to take this town over. They're going to have to like win multiple championships. I think they almost have to like create a Spurs kind of run, which this doesn't seem like they're built for that. They're built for more a couple of rings in the next few years.
I want to talk. You talked a little bit about like New York media. We talked about Knicks and Nets. I want to know like your opinion in general as someone that's pretty plugged into what's going on. Like, how much do you think the Knicks' faults are overplayed in the New York media versus like how much do you think that like they might just be a normal team just struggling? Obviously, you can't win all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, under like the Dolan years, the faults and the embarrassing stories and stuff like that, there's times where the Knicks and the Mets, they're kind of like the punchline to jokes, and the Jets, I guess you could say at this point. Sure. It does become where they are a punchline, their faults get, accentuated and all that stuff. We actually had I was talking to a coworker of mine. He tweeted out something about Pete Alonso hitting a home run against the Cubs last night. I mean, he hit it out of the park into Waveland Avenue. And he said like the numbers it did were like, not that great. He tweeted out a video of Cubs fans dancing, and he put like, he tweeted out a video of the Mets making a bunch of errors, and he said it was like through the roof, the engagement on that. And it's because they have become like these punchlines and all that kind of stuff. So I do think a lot of the times it's like people just want to laugh at it because it's been such a long running joke, and it's going to take like years of being good to wipe that off. But I also think that with the media, they know that the really embarrassing, ugly stories are the ones that get clicks. It's the ones that, Knicks for clicks is a saying on Twitter for a reason. But as someone that made content out of it, it was a gold mine because I always had some sort of embarrassing story to blog about. So I thank him for that.
Yeah, I mean that there you go. At least you got a personal silver lining out of it. But like,
yeah,
it's like, again, we talk about how bad the last 20 years have been. Like, obviously, beyond being just a general fan of the Knicks, like what has compelled you to stay so involved with the team and follow the team throughout all this bullshit that's gone around with this franchise?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's just one of those things that's just ingrained in you. It's like brushing your teeth, you wake up, you get dressed, and then you watch the Knicks, in the winter when there's nothing else going on. And, you get, the thing is you get like so like hungry for wins or positivity that like the littlest glimmer of hope just gets you so excited. Porzingis comes in and I'm just head over heels in love with him, and everyone was, and it was like, oh my God, this might be it. And then you talk to yourself and LeBron, you always hear about the Mecca, the big city draw and all this kind of stuff. So then every free agency period, you're always convinced you have a chance at a guy due to they're connecting the dots about some high school coach that the Knicks hired and how, his marketing team wants him here and all that kind of stuff. So there's always hope always springs eternal here, which is crazy to think about considering how little results actually come out of it. But, and then in the lottery, they always fall in the lottery. They never pick the right guy and all that kind of stuff. But again, the whole city wants it together. And, either whether you're with your buddies or you're on social media, you're following other Knicks fans, it really is like a great fan base, and it builds character, all that losing, but it also just builds like camaraderie. It's like we're in like a basketball war zone every single night, and we're, you know, everyone's laughing at us. But when people laugh at us, it's like, hey man, you can't laugh. It's like your family. It's like, you can't laugh at my, you know, family. I can make fun of my family. You can't make fun of them. So it is one of those very unique things that, you know, keeps you coming back for more. And honestly, like the fact that, you know, the Knicks were my first, you know, thing I covered here at Barstool, I always have a little, you know, extra love in my heart for them. And I feel like I have to, you know, cover them, because I know if I was a reader on the site, I'd want people covering them as well. So I always have to, you know, and again, they always keep me coming back for more with some sort of stupid thing they're doing. It's been so much nicer covering the wins instead of the losses and the scandals that hit the back page. But again, like my first true like love of a team was the 90s Knicks. The Mets and the Giants, I was fans of them. Like the Mets were the first ever team that I ever like followed in terms of pro sports, but the Knicks, like that was turning on the pregame show, watching the entire game through commercials all the way to the post game until I basically just passed out because I was, you know, 8 years old. Like that's the kind of like grip the Knicks had on me at a young age, and that's just going to continue my entire life, for better or worse. And so far, it's been a lot more for worse recently.